So today I wanted to talk about Code in a Box. If you've not heard of that, it's basically a physical game where instead of having a cartridge or a disc, you get a code to download the game digitally. And I want to talk today about that because recently, very recently, just yesterday as of this recording, Avowed got a pre-order announcement. Like, you can pre-order the game right now, and the game is getting a physical copy of the game. And what they mean by physical is you actually get a game case, or in this case a steelbook, and you don't get a disc. You only get the code to download the game, and you get it like 4 or 5 days early, which that's a different thing altogether. But yeah, you get a code in the box. I wanted to talk to you guys about it and my thoughts on this trend in this model that has been happening for the last 4 or 5 years, or honestly even before that, when the Nintendo Switch came onto the scene. Like I mentioned before, the Nintendo Switch is when this trend really started to become normal. And what I mean by that, so the Switch, when it came out, there was limited components to where cartridge manufacturing was very limited. So there was only a certain amount of cartridges with certain amount of space that Nintendo was able to produce. So I think it was like 8 gigabytes to 16 gigabytes, and I don't remember if 32 gigabytes was available at launch or if it was introduced later. But eventually they were trying to get to 64 gigabytes of storage on a cartridge for a physical game. And I think only one or a couple games actually had a 64 gigabyte cartridge, but I'm not entirely sure. But I think at least one game did. So with Nintendo Switch, the first thing that happened with that console is we got games that were fully on cartridge, whether it be the base 1.0 version of the game or a revised cart with updates on it. But eventually Nintendo started to offer games that required content download. So you get the game, but you only get a certain amount of the game on the cartridge, but you have to download the rest in order to play the full thing. And a lot of people don't like that, including myself. I think it's like, what's the point? Because I have to download the game anyway, so why even bother with doing a physical release? But they started with that, and it eventually led up to a code in the box. And Nintendo really was the one that really solidified that model and that trend. So you would get a Nintendo Switch game and it had like a banner at the top and it says code in the box, download required, no cartridge inside, or something on the lines of that. And as time went on, Nintendo really started to push this out more and more. But most of the time with games that have a code in the box, they were more of indie titles. They weren't the big AAA or AA games. Most of the time, if a AAA game required a download, it was that required a download banner at the bottom of the game case. It wasn't a full-on code in the box. But eventually that changed, and more specifically, a publisher decided to really incorporate a code in the box eventually, not at first when their games launched. And of course, I'm talking about Ubisoft. And I got a couple games here to show you that these games, when they first came out, were on cartridge. Even though it was the 1.0 version of the game on cartridge, the full game was on cartridge. And that was South Park, The Fractured But Whole. We got Mario Sparks of Hope, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, the original game. So all three of these games, when they came out on cart, like I've said, but eventually Ubisoft stopped making cartridges for the game itself, or the games themselves. And when you go to Walmart, GameStop, and Best Buy retail stores, you find these games new, but they have that banner at the top that it's a code on the box. They no longer include a cartridge. And of course, Ubisoft being as cheap as they are, of course, they were the ones to really incorporate the code on the box really early. So Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle is not that old of a game. It came out in, I think, 2022 or 2021, somewhere around that ballpark. And it's only 2024, and already they stopped making cartridges for the game. You can still find these games on cartridge, like on secondhand stores and stuff, like mom and pop shops, even GameStop used. But if you want to have them new and you want to buy them at a retail store, it's going to be a code in the box. So when that started happening with Nintendo, the same publisher, Ubisoft, started to incorporate that with the other platforms. So now Xbox games and PlayStation games started to incorporate the code in the box model. And as of recent with Ubisoft, their hit franchise Just Dance, the last 2 years have been a code in the box. So I think Just Dance 2022 was the last Just Dance game that got a physical cart and a physical disc as well. And I think it is pushing the industry forward into the digital era. And as you can see behind me, I'm not looking forward to the all digital future, because it is true, you just pay for the license to play the game, and eventually that license can get taken away from you and you will no longer have access to the game, or the game gets delisted and they can make it to where you're not able to download the game anymore, or they can just remove your download. So that is a very scary thought, and people that brush off that, it's not that much of a worry about. I was like, yeah, it is. You're spending your hard-earned money and they can take the product that you paid for away from you. And that sucks. So like I mentioned before with Avowed, that game is getting a physical release, quote unquote, and it's a code in the box. You get a steelbook. The steelbook looks nice, don't get me wrong, but they are charging over $90 for this steelbook. You're paying $90 for a metal case and a paper slip with a code on it. And that to me is wild, because why would you spend $90 on a steelbook case that can hold a disc, but it won't hold the disc that the game is supposed to be in there? So I don't know why these publishers and the Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo bother making a physical copy of a game if it's just a code in the box. You're just wasting resources and plastic. Ubisoft's excuse for them doing a code in the box is so that grandparents and parents can buy a physical item to give to their children for Christmas or birthdays as a gift. And I kind of could understand that, but like I said, they could just get them a Nintendo eShop card, a PlayStation card, or a Xbox Live card. It's not that hard. But what the problem with the model of code in the box is, because the fact that it's a code, these codes have an expiration date, and eventually that expiration date will come, and not a lot of people like to buy a code in the box game. They would buy it when it's being liquidated for a couple dollars. They're not going to spend $20 or even more than that for a code in a box. And if people don't buy a code in a box game and it sits at retail for years and eventually they decide to liquidate it for a couple dollars, more chances than not that those codes are no longer going to work because it's been too long. So that's a problem with the code in the box. So like I've mentioned before with Avowed, Xbox, what they're doing is ridiculous, but PlayStation as well is also a sinner in a sense of doing the same thing. So over the course of the PlayStation 5's life cycle, Sony has been pumping out these collector's editions that are big and grand. They come with steelbooks, they come with statues, art books, the works that you expect from a collector's edition. And they charge over $250 for most of these things. And unfortunately, Sony decided to just include the game as a voucher and not include a physical disc itself, even though the collector's edition has a steelbook. And most people, like the people that collect steelbooks, probably like that, but like most people like to have usefulness for their stuff. So a steelbook case should house a game disc or a cartridge if it's a Nintendo Switch game. So receiving a collector's edition that comes with a steelbook case but no physical disc kind of feels like a waste. So Sony's really been honing in on doing that, and I think it's ridiculous. You're paying $250, you don't even get a disc. Come on, like it's stupid. Like, as fancy as those statues look, like come on. Since we're moving towards a digital age, the unfortunate thing about all digital is the fact that the digital games cost the exact same amount as the physical games. So the digital games cost $60, $70, as well as the physical. So that is unappealing to some people, and especially like physical collectors. So to entice people to move over to the digital age, more for than just convenience, so you don't have to go to the store or wait for the delivery driver to deliver your games. Make the digital games cheaper, like $15 cheaper, to really entice you into just buying the game digitally. Because why on earth would we spend the exact same amount on a digital game if we can get the physical copy instead and actually have a tangible physical thing in our hands that actually we can use and won't be taken away from us, even if the game gets delisted or whatever. So that's why people care about having the disc and the cartridge. You can't take that away from us. So yeah, the unfortunate truth is not a lot of times do games go on sale, especially the newer titles. Like eventually they go down to $10 to $15 a couple months later, but there are some games that don't get that same sale, that stay at $60, $50 forever. And games do go on sale digitally a lot, and they do go on sale for deep discounts, but most of those games are really old titles. The newer titles, you'd be lucky if you get $10 off sometimes. But with physical games, the physical copy goes on sale most of the time a month after release, depending on how well the game sells. So like I mentioned before, I keep mentioning Ubisoft, but they're the prime example on what not to do. So Ubisoft loves to pump out these Far Cry-like games that most people don't really care for, but a lot of times those games go on deep discount a month or 2 months after release. And you gotta ask yourself, like, is it really worth buying those games on launch for the $70 that Ubisoft charges, or wait 2 months and have the game be $40, $30? So that is why like the divide between digital and physical exists, where people are either pro physical or pro digital, and there are upsides to both sides and downsides to both sides, but because of the code in the box, it's this weird hybrid of both, where you do get a physical, tangible thing, but there's nothing in the box for you to use. Like, only just that one time, and that one time, like, you can get it taken away from you eventually, and that sucks. And I do think this weird code in the box hybrid thing should die off, and these publishers and these corporations like Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony, they can't just be picky on what game gets a code in the box and what gets a full release or a digital only release. Like, take away the code in the box. Just either go full in on physical or go full in on digital. Don't just play both sides. It's very insulting to us, the consumer, that you're saying that, hey, you get a physical thing, but there's nothing inside of it. That's just very frustrating. And with Avowed, given it's one of the most anticipated games for Microsoft right now, it comes out in February, I am looking forward to playing the game. Of course, I'm going to play the game through Game Pass. But, if I wanted the physical disc, it's not an option. And I'm not paying $90 for a steelbook. Even though steelbooks are nice, they scratch easy. I don't really collect them and go out of my way to do so. Those are my thoughts on the topic. Of course, I would like to hear your thoughts. And if you think the code in the box should go away, or should it be here to stay and eventually transition to digital only? But once again, I don't know. Just let me know. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.